After a grueling 24-hour shift, firefighter Victor Lang just wanted to go home, unwind, and enjoy a quiet evening. But one envelope changed everything. Inside, a letter filled with passion, longing, and a name he didn't recognize. It wasn't meant for him. It was for his wife. And it was from a man who was supposed to be behind bars. In that moment, Victor's world shattered. But he wasn't the kind of man to lash out blindly. No, he was going to uncover every lie, every secret. And when the time came, he would make sure she faced the consequences. Because some betrayals don't just break a man, they forge him into something stronger. Victor Lang stepped out of his truck, his heavy boots striking the pavement with a dull thud. The long shift at the firehouse had left him physically drained, but there was always a certain satisfaction in exhaustion earned from service. Fires contained, lives protected, it was what he had signed up for. The quiet of the neighborhood felt like a stark contrast to the chaos he had just left behind, the calm before another inevitable storm. He moved toward the mailbox, his fingers automatically sifting through the usual clutter of bills and advertisements. It was an ordinary routine, one that required no thought, until something unfamiliar caught his eye. A cream-colored envelope, its surface adorned with elegant, flowing script, addressed to his wife, Lauren Hale. A ripple of unease tightened in his chest, subtle but insistent. The envelope carried a weight beyond its physical form. Inside the house, Victor dropped his keys onto the counter, the metallic jingle swallowed by the stillness of the kitchen. The envelope felt heavy in his grasp, the unshakable sense of something being wrong creeping deeper into his bones. His fingers traced the seal, and with deliberate precision, he pried it open. The neatly folded letter within revealed words that drained the warmth from his body. My dearest Lauren, every moment without you is unbearable. The thought of our last stolen kiss sustains me in this place. I count the days until I can hold you again, feel the warmth of your skin against mine. Our love is the only thing keeping me going. Soon we won't have to hide anymore. No more secrets, no more lies. Just us, together as it was always meant to be. A few more months, my love. Stay strong for me. Soon we will have our forever. Yours always, Daryl. Victor's grip tightened around the letter, the paper crumpling beneath his fingers as if he could crush the weight of its meaning. His pulse thundered in his ears, drowning out the steady rhythm of his own breath. Betrayal had a distinct way of making the world shift, distorting everything that had once felt certain. He had been blind. He had trusted. And now that trust was nothing more than a cruel joke at his expense. He forced himself to unclench his hands, carefully smoothing out the letter before folding it back into the envelope. There was no room for reckless confrontation, no space for rage-driven impulsivity. Victor had always prided himself on control, on calculated action. If there was more to uncover, he would find it. He needed to know just how deep the deception ran before he confronted the woman he had vowed to spend his life with. The following days passed in a haze of meticulous observation. Lauren moved through their home with the same practiced ease, her laughter bright, her routine unchanged. If guilt burdened her, she masked it well. But Victor saw beyond the surface now. He noticed the subtle glances at her phone, the quiet moments where she lingered just a little too long before responding to a message. Each detail, once insignificant, now carried weight. Late at night, when the house was shrouded in silence, Victor sat alone in the dim glow of Lauren's laptop screen. His fingers moved swiftly, his mind sharp despite the exhaustion gnawing at the edges of his thoughts. The password was weak, an oversight born from misplaced confidence. Within moments, he had access to years of deception. Emails, messages, each one a carefully crafted betrayal, a confession without remorse. Daryl, I told Victor another lie today. Said I had a late meeting, but really I was with you. It's getting easier. He never questions me. He trusts me completely. Sometimes I feel bad, but only sometimes. I can't wait until you're out. We'll finally be free. No more sneaking around, no more pretending. Just us. Victor's eyes moved down the endless string of confessions, each one another nail in the coffin of the life he thought he had built. Phone records, financial transactions, everything pointed to a carefully maintained illusion. Lauren had been funneling money into a prison account, supporting a man who had no business existing in their world. She had woven a web of lies so intricate, so well executed, that he wondered just how long she had been laughing behind his back. By the time dawn broke, Victor had all the pieces. He sat motionless, his fingers resting on the keyboard, his thoughts sharper than they had ever been. There was no more doubt, no more questioning. He knew the truth now, in all its ugly, unfiltered glory. As Lauren's car pulled into the driveway, Victor remained seated at the kitchen table, the evidence spread out before him. His heartbeat was steady, his expression unreadable. The front door opened with its usual creak, followed by the familiar rustle of keys dropping onto the counter. Lauren's voice drifted through the air, casual, warm, so deceptively normal. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he let the silence stretch, let it grow heavy. Finally, he lifted his gaze, meeting her eyes as she stepped into the kitchen. The moment she saw what lay before him, her expression shifted. Recognition, fear, and then something else. Victor saw it the instant it happened. The flicker of calculation, the moment she decided how to play this. He had seen her wear 1,000 expressions, but none quite like the one she wore now. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't even ashamed. But Victor Lang was not a man who acted without thought. He had the truth, and soon, she would know exactly what that meant. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Victor Lang had always believed in control. In fire, in chaos, in the unpredictable nature of his work, he found order. But here, in his own home, the foundation he had built was cracking beneath him. The betrayal wasn't just a fleeting moment. It was systematic, deliberate, woven into the very fabric of his marriage. Now he had to unravel every thread. The night after reading the letter, Victor sat in the dim glow of his living room, a drink untouched on the table beside him. He wasn't the kind of man who acted without thought, but this wasn't something he could ignore. A confrontation now would only lead to half-truths and crocodile tears. No, he needed the full picture first. He needed to understand just how deep the lies ran. Lauren moved through the house as if nothing had changed. She kissed his cheek before heading to work, sent him texts throughout the day. Lies wrapped in normalcy. But Victor had begun seeing through it, noticing the moments where she lingered too long on her phone, the hushed tones of calls she took when she thought he was out of earshot. Every movement was calculated, rehearsed. He started with the bank records. Sitting at his desk, he logged into their shared account, searching for irregularities. It didn't take long. Over the past 2 years, significant sums had been withdrawn at regular intervals. Always unremarkable amounts, nothing that would raise suspicion on its own. But tracking them over time, the pattern became obvious. The money was being funneled elsewhere. Lauren had been sending it to a prison commissary fund, supporting Daryl Kane while Victor had unknowingly financed the affair. Emails came next. He'd always trusted her, never felt the need to invade her privacy. But trust was a currency already spent, and all that remained were hard facts. Lauren's laptop was password protected, but barely. Within moments, Victor had access to the inbox that had held years of deception. Daryl, I told Victor another lie today. Said I had a late meeting, but really I was with you. It's getting easier. He never questions me. Sometimes I feel bad, but only sometimes. Soon we'll be free. No more hiding. Just you and me. Victor scrolled through endless digital confessions, each one another weight pressing against his chest. There were details of secret meetings, whispered plans of escape, fantasies of a life they would build once Daryl was released. Lauren had woven an entirely separate existence, parallel to the life they had shared in their home. To her, he had been a placeholder, a means to an end. The anger came in slow waves, creeping beneath his skin, curling in his stomach. But he refused to let it take him over. Anger was reckless. Anger was blind. Instead, he forced himself to focus on the facts. He needed more. He needed undeniable proof, something that would shatter any attempt at denial. He checked phone records next. Lauren had always been careful, but no amount of caution could erase the digital footprint she had left behind. Hundreds of calls to the correctional facility. Late at night, early mornings. Each one a whispered conversation, a moment stolen in secrecy. She had spent more time speaking to Daryl than she ever had with him. Then came the final piece. Digging deeper, Victor uncovered Lauren's volunteer records. She hadn't just been writing and calling. She had physically been at the prison, visiting Daryl under the guise of volunteer work. For years, every business trip, every family emergency, every moment she claimed to be elsewhere lies. Lies stacked so high, he wondered how she had kept track of them all. By the time dawn crept through the curtains, Victor had everything he needed. The weight of truth settled on his shoulders, heavy but solid. He had gone from suspicion to certainty, from uncertainty to a plan. There would be no angry outburst, no desperate plea for explanation. Lauren had already chosen her path. Victor simply intended to make sure she faced the consequences. That morning, when she breezed into the kitchen, flashing the same effortless smile she had every day, he played his part. He greeted her as he always did, keeping his voice level, his expression unreadable. She kissed his cheek, as if she hadn't been betraying him for years. He let her, because now the game had changed. She thought she had been in control. She had no idea that control had just slipped through her fingers. Victor Lang sat in the kitchen, his fingers lightly tapping against the wooden table. Before him lay the culmination of his investigation. Emails, bank statements, call logs, all meticulously gathered in silent preparation. He had spent the past few days moving like a ghost in his own home, methodically collecting proof while keeping his composure. But now the moment had come. Lauren Hale walked through the front door, her movements fluid, unburdened. She had no idea that the world she had built for herself was about to collapse. Her purse landed on the counter, her keys jingling as they slid across the surface. She barely glanced at Victor as she stepped into the kitchen, expecting nothing more than the routine of their shared life. Then she saw the evidence. Her gaze flickered, recognition dawning in the briefest moment of hesitation before she steadied herself. The carefully curated mask remained intact, but Victor noticed the shift, the calculation. She had always been quick to adapt, skilled at twisting reality to fit her own version of the truth. He remained silent, letting the weight of the moment settle between them. He studied her, the way she straightened her posture, the way her lips pressed together in thought. Years of deception unraveled in his mind, piece by piece, revealing the cold mechanics of a carefully orchestrated betrayal. She wasn't ashamed. She wasn't remorseful. If anything, there was a glint of amusement in her eyes, as if this were nothing more than an unfortunate inconvenience. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed, the tension in the room thickening. The truth had already been laid bare. Daryl, the hidden money, the lies spanning years. There was nothing left to uncover. Yet, she showed no regret, only indifference. She had already moved on in her mind, leaving behind the shell of a marriage that had been nothing more than a convenience to her. Victor exhaled slowly, his grip tightening on the edge of the table. There was no need for raised voices, no need for accusations. The facts spoke for themselves. The life they had built had been a facade, and now it was nothing more than scattered fragments of what once seemed real. He stood, pushing his chair back with deliberate calm. The room felt colder, emptier. He had spent days preparing for this moment, but now that it was here, it felt strangely hollow. She expected resistance, an argument, maybe even a desperate plea for answers. Instead, he merely stepped aside, leaving an open path for her to walk away. She hesitated just for a second. Perhaps she had expected a different reaction, one fueled by anger or grief. But Victor had moved past that. He had no intention of playing her games anymore. Without another word, he turned away, letting the silence linger. Behind him, the sound of her departure echoed through the house, the rustling of belongings hastily gathered, the sharp click of the door as it shut behind her. Then, nothing. The space around him felt eerily still, as if the house itself had been holding its breath, waiting for this moment. Victor remained standing in the silence, absorbing the weight of what had just happened. The confrontation was over, but the battle was far from finished. He knew there was more to come. Lauren had made her choices, and now she would face the consequences. And this time he was ready. The legal battle began as soon as Lauren Hale stepped out of the house. Victor Lang knew she wouldn't leave quietly, and he had prepared for that inevitability. The moment she was gone, he shifted from a grieving husband to a man focused on strategy. There was no room for sentimentality, not anymore. Lauren's first move was predictable. She filed for divorce and demanded a significant share of their assets, claiming she had contributed equally to their life together. But Victor was ready. With the documents he had meticulously gathered, bank transfers, emails, and her own incriminating words, he dismantled her claims one by one. His lawyer, Melissa Carter, built the case piece by piece, ensuring that Lauren's deception was laid bare before the court. The hearings were tense. Lauren had found legal representation in Vanessa Thorne, a woman known for aggressive tactics and an ability to spin narratives. She painted Lauren as a victim, neglected, trapped in a passionless marriage, driven into the arms of another man out of emotional desperation. But Victor had the truth, and the truth left no room for manipulation. The judge listened, expression unreadable, as Melissa presented evidence that shredded Lauren's arguments. The secret bank transactions, the communications with Daryl Kane, the attempt to frame Victor at his workplace. Each revelation further eroded whatever credibility Lauren had hoped to maintain. With each passing session, her confidence wavered. The smirk she had once worn with ease became forced. Her posture stiffened under the weight of undeniable facts. In the end, the ruling was clear. Victor retained all assets in his name. The house, the savings, even his pension, all protected. Lauren was entitled to nothing but her personal belongings. The victory was decisive, yet Victor took no pleasure in it. There was no joy in watching someone unravel, even someone who had betrayed him so completely. But justice had been served. The fallout extended beyond the courtroom. The school board had already taken interest in Lauren's actions, and Victor ensured they had all the information they needed. The meetings were swift, the decision even swifter. A woman who had spent years manipulating students, lying to her own family, and conspiring with a convict had no place in an institution meant to guide young minds. Her dismissal was inevitable, and as she walked out of Lincoln High for the last time, her carefully crafted image shattered. Meanwhile, Daryl Kane had his own reckoning. The man had emerged from prison with a misplaced sense of invincibility, emboldened by the fantasy he and Lauren had built. But Victor had anticipated his next move. A restraining order was put in place before Daryl had the chance to act. The night he arrived at Victor's doorstep, fists clenched and rage barely contained, the police were already on their way. It was over before it began. The parole violation was clear, and within hours, Daryl was back behind bars. Lauren's world had collapsed. The lover she had sacrificed everything for was gone. The home she had taken for granted lost, her career in ruins. But even then, she refused to acknowledge her own responsibility. Blame was an easy refuge, and she clung to it with the same desperation she had once reserved for her lies. Victor, however, was done. Done with the battles, the deception, the games. He had fought for his truth, protected what was his, and emerged from the wreckage intact. The storm had passed, leaving only the quiet clarity of a life that was finally his again. And for the first time in years, he could breathe. The weeks following the legal battles passed in a strange, quiet rhythm. The chaos that had consumed Victor Lang's life had finally settled, leaving behind a stark, unfamiliar calm. The house felt different now, lighter, as if it had been holding its breath for years, suffocating under the weight of deception. Now it was his again, stripped of its former illusions. He threw himself into work, finding solace in the predictable structure of the firehouse. The job had always been his anchor, a place where purpose outweighed personal struggles. His colleagues, having witnessed his ordeal unfold in muted whispers and stolen glances, rallied behind him. They didn't pry, didn't ask unnecessary questions. Instead, They showed their support in quiet, steady ways. An extra hand when a task needed doing, a shared drink at the end of a long shift, an unspoken understanding that some wounds took time to heal. But healing wasn't just about moving forward, it was about reclaiming what had been lost. Victor knew that the past couldn't be erased, but he refused to let it define him. Instead, he focused on what came next. His story had spread throughout the department, not as gossip, but as a testament to resilience. It wasn't long before the chief approached him with an unexpected proposition: mentorship. New recruits, fresh-faced and eager, needed someone to guide them, to show them what it truly meant to wear the uniform. At first, Victor hesitated. He had never seen himself as a mentor, never thought of his experiences as anything more than personal trials. But as he stood before the next generation of firefighters, watching their nervous anticipation, he realized that every scar he carried had the potential to teach. Standing in front of the class, he spoke not about betrayal but about integrity, about standing tall when the world tried to knock you down, about resilience forged in fire, both literal and metaphorical. The young firefighters listened, absorbing each word, and for the first time in a long while, Victor felt something stir, purpose beyond survival. Outside of work, he slowly rebuilt his personal life. It was a cautious process, one step at a time. Trust was not something he could offer freely anymore, but he wasn't willing to close himself off entirely. Over time, the walls he had constructed began to lower, and in their place, something new emerged. Melissa Carter, his attorney, had been a constant presence throughout the ordeal, not just as a legal ally, but as a quiet force of understanding. Their conversations, once centered around court filings and evidence, had started to shift. A shared meal after a long day, a conversation that stretched beyond business into something personal. It was unspoken, tentative, but real. A connection built not on necessity, but on mutual respect. One evening, they sat across from each other in a quiet restaurant, the glow of candlelight reflecting in her eyes. The weight of the past still lingered between them, but it no longer felt suffocating. It felt like something that could be acknowledged and left behind. Melissa lifted her glass, a small smile playing at the corner of her lips. "To new beginnings," she said simply. Victor hesitated for only a moment before clinking his glass against hers. The past had shaped him, but it would not define him. There was still a life ahead, one that was his to rebuild, his to shape. And for the first time in a long time, he looked forward to what came next.